Well, the European football seasons are underway across the continent, and just as we're hitting our stride and getting going, we stop for an international break. And not just that, but an international break that no one really takes seriously and doesn't have any important games. Why do we do this? Why is the calendar this way? And how do we fix it? Because it simply doesn't make sense. We're going to talk about that next, here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. So we're into the season, but it's sort of that false start period. That's an American football term for when a play starts too early or not all at once and then has to reset. And that sort of feels like what has happened across Europe with the Premier League and the Bundesliga and La Liga and Serie A, where you play these couple of games and then you have to stop and take a break and sort of reassess, and now it feels like the season starts for real, except those 2, 3, 4 games in some cases, they matter. And we can look at clubs whose seasons are already in a little bit of trouble, and yet it doesn't even feel like they've started. And then you've got this international window, and the whole thing is disjointed and doesn't make sense. And I think there's a lot of reasons to try and fix it. So we're going to talk about what they are today. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below for me so you can follow the channel. Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. Do you like this format, or would you like to see some changes? And what do you think about the changes we're going to suggest in that video? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave some comments on Twitter at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So this feels like one of those, this is how it's always been done, so this is how it's done sort of situations. And I hate that. And if you feel like that's why, let me know down in those comments. If it's just, this is traditionally when the international break has always been. There's always been one here. But I'm going to need a better argument than that, because the game is evolving. And over the last decade or so, it has become a year-round event. Football, European football, world football. These players get almost no break. We saw it with the Euros and the Copa America tournaments this summer, and then the Olympics. And God help the players that played in both. Julian Alvarez, I mean, how is he even still walking at this point between the World Cup and back-to-back seasons with City, and then playing in Copa America, and then playing in the Olympics, and now he's with a new club? I mean, my God. And so we really have to reassess this, but also from a competitive standpoint for these leagues, does it make sense, and is it putting the best product out on the field? Now, this is where we have to find the balance, and I'm speaking obviously from a neutral standpoint, right? I do not work for any of the big clubs. Obviously, I do not work for FIFA. So you've got UEFA, you've got FIFA, you've got the Premier League, you've got La Liga, you've got Serie A. I mean, there's all these competing interests, and of course, this is one of I'm going to steal a phrase from one of the shows on FC radio here in the States, the only football radio channel that we have, which has its pros and cons. But the very wise Charlie Stilitano likes to say, "It's the money, you morons," and he's absolutely right, because it's all about money. It obviously comes down to money. But I think sometimes the people who want the money grab get too short-sighted, and there are better ways to make more money and do the right thing and keep the players safe. And I think that's an opportunity we have here. I hate that the season starts the way it did, right? We play 2 or 3 games or 4 games, depending on what league you are in, and then we just stop. And meanwhile, the transfer window is still open. And there's a couple different solutions to this. You could theoretically close the transfer window sooner, and I would like to see the transfer window closed before the seasons start. I don't love the fact that you are still making additions to these clubs even though play has begun, because it sort of discounts those first games. It sort of eliminates the importance of them, and yet those points count, or points dropped hurt just as much as they do later in the season. But you're not at full strength. These clubs are not at full strength, and even the clubs who are not making major changes, they're not at full strength yet if they have players coming back from international play. Look at Manchester City, who haven't been hurt by it because they're very good, but they haven't played Foden or Rodri yet. 2 of their 3 best players, or 2 of their 4 best players, I should say, have not even seen the field yet, haven't even dressed yet. And so, is that really the spirit of competition that we want? Now, they got away with it with not dropping any points, but they may not have had they played somebody better, and there are other clubs and other examples. So I don't love that the season starts so soon after the the summer international competitions, and I don't love that the transfer window is still open. I don't think I would move the transfer window deadline up any. I would move the start of the season back. And this international break is exactly the line of demarcation I would draw. In fact, what I would do is move this international break up a little bit. It's not an international break, it's just one more international window. And I would also make it a non-first team window. And I don't know exactly how I would define that, but there would have to be parameters for who's a first team call-up and who is not. But the players who played all summer in the Euros, in the Copa America, wouldn't be eligible to play in this international window because they're all friendlies anyway, and half of them aren't. Not half, but there are a lot of big names who have opted out of this international window, or even their countries have just elected not to call them up because they just need a break, or because this is an opportunity to see other players. And that's a key element here, is it would be a win across the board. For these players who can't quite get a look with their national teams, this would be an opportunity to do that. Now, that doesn't work for like the AFCON qualifiers, right? They're obviously trying to qualify for a tournament, but the whole AFCON thing is its own video, and their calendar being different than the rest of the world's is its own problem that needs to be fixed, because their biggest competition happens in the middle of the club season, and that's been beat to death, but it is a problem. So that would need to be solved in and of itself. But generally speaking, most of the rest of the world is playing in friendlies. So you don't need your best players there. And this is an opportunity to debut or to try out or to see some younger players or some players that are on the fringe. Now, if you're going to do that, there is the debate of whether that should cap tie them. Right? You don't want to be predatory. We don't want to set up an environment where nations are being predatory in their cap ties. And so, you make a rule saying you can't have any first teamers in your camp, or maybe you limit it to a few of them or something like that for this window. And then so you start 11 new guys and you cap tie all these guys that are never going to make the national team. That would be an unintended consequence that we do not want. So there have to be some sort of stipulation maybe that that you can't have a debut cap tie situation in this window or something along those lines. But those are solvable problems, and I'm open to that debate. If you've got thoughts on that, get down in that comment section, let me know. But that is something that comes to mind, is if you take out all the first teamers and bring in 25 new guys, yeah, that's great that they get to show off, but they may never have a chance to actually play for their country, and then they're cap tied to them and their international career is essentially over. That's not a situation we want either, so we do have to be aware of that. But generally speaking, if we moved this window up a couple weeks, played it, and then started the season on September 1st when the transfer window ends, that would really be a much smoother transition, would it not? You could even wait a week or so into September. Keep the transfer deadline, the transfer window closing on September 1st or August 31st, however you want to put it. Have it close there and then start a week later, so even those last-minute acquisitions have a week to get acclimated. Because that's another one of the problems, is these players who come in now aren't going to have a chance to get up to speed for a little while. We looked at this with, Eric Ten Hag mentioned this at Manchester United, that he's, not Harry Potter because he's such a condescending douche. That's how he had to put it. But his point was valid in that a player that they just acquired can't just hit the ground running, and it's going to take them a few weeks or a month to get him up to speed. And his point was valid, just only he can say it in such a terrible way. But that's another consideration. So if we had the break after the Olympics, after the Copa America, after the Euro, had a little break for everybody to recharge, and then you come back with a friendly window in late August, right? These last 2 weeks of August, when the season has begun, instead of beginning all your European seasons, you do an international friendly window to sort of warm back up. And maybe the nations can call up a few first teamers, but you put some sort of limit on it. You restrict who can play there. You let those guys go to camp to get back under, get their feet back under them. You're playing games that don't matter. Guys with new teams don't feel obligated to go play internationally in this window. They can get acclimated with their new clubs, with their new coaches, with their teammates. You get to try new guys out, and then you start your season. And once the season starts, it starts, and it keeps going until the next international window. And at least you're getting a nice run of games in there. This 3-game start and then just stop for an international window that means absolutely nothing just feels like a real dry hump in terms of development and getting teams ready. And what is this season? It's not enough to really evaluate what's going on, even if it is, it's too late to make changes. The rosters are who they are now, and there's really nothing we can do about it. So now we just sit around for 2 weeks, watch some crappy friendlies, and go, okay, when do we restart again? It's like having a caution flag in the middle of the first 10 laps of the race. So it's really just disjointed. And when it comes to money, I feel like more money would be made in this format. I'd be more inclined to watch the international friendlies if you're debuting a bunch of young players. That would interest me. I'd be more into the start of the Premier League season or the Serie A season or the La Liga season if it wasn't going to stop again in 3 weeks, right? But it now feels like that was sort of a preseason. Even Pep Guardiola said that, and he said it very facetiously. He thinks these games are just as important as everybody else, but he sort of treats it like a preseason because you're going to stop and reset. And now he'll come back with the full squad, and so you can't help but blame the fans for sort of feeling the same way when coaches are out there saying the same thing. So I would love to see some changes that lead to a much smoother transition to the start of the season. And once we hit the ground running and we just go. But I'd love to get your thoughts. Do you like this setup? Do you like any of the changes? Do you have better changes? I will admit I haven't completely thought this one through. It's just sort of coming to mind as we're in this break, and you sort of sit there and go, why? But I'd love to get your thoughts. Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel, and check out our website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.